Now, even though I had a number of films that I despised in 2022 that made my worst list, chap, there were several films. There were 5 movies that I would never say that they were I would never put them on a worst of list. But they definitely disappointed me in a number of ways. And some of the things they had in the films, though, they quite good. They had some things that I think that did work, but they just had a lot of issues. They had a lot of problems, a lot of flaws. And I wanted to bring up 5 of those movies, chat. And I'm sure some of these are going to be controversial. Hey, that's okay. As I always say, chat, like what you like, dislike what you dislike. But I wanted to bring this up, and I wanted to kind of talk about them to a degree, at least share why I feel the way I do about some of these movies. So to start off, my top 5 most disappointing movies of 2022, I wanted to go ahead and bring up my 5th one, chat. And the 5th most disappointing movie of 2022 for me was Jordan Peele's Nope. Now, there are a lot of things about this film that I think are quite good. I really enjoyed the UFO, the creature in this movie was great. I think that's going to be, like, after this decade's over, people are going to look at that and go like, that was really inspired and really different and quite horrific. There's some great sequences where they build tension, especially with that creature, that I think are quite good. And there's some great camera work. There's some great cinematography in this movie. And there's a number of supporting performances I feel like that are quite good, especially by Brandon Pereira, who plays this character of Angel, who assists the main 2 in this movie, where it's about this farmstead and this small community that's being preyed upon by this UFO. But Brandon Pereira, I thought, was quite good as character of Angel. And Michael Wincott, even though what they do with his character later on the film makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. I feel like he does a good job. And Stephen Yeun, where even though I feel like he plays an important role in this film, he's doing a good job. It's almost like so much of that part of the story wasn't needed. It was like almost like it could have been a whole separate movie. I think that's the problem with this movie. It's like Jordan Peele in general as a filmmaker for me after Get Out, which is one of my favorite movies of the 2010s, chat. It's great. It's in my top 10. What a terrific debut. But ever since that time, I feel like he's really struggled with all of his other projects since then. You know, not to say there weren't good parts to all his movies like In Us, or, you know, certainly not Twilight Zone, I was disappointed by, or even some aspects of Candyman. But it's like he has all these ideas, but none of them feel like they're very well executed. And I think Nope is another example of that. Except now there's like so many characters. Like, I think one of the biggest problems this movie has is the lead characters, played by Daniel Kaluuya and Keke Palmer, are these brother and sister who are taking care of this farmstead after their father, played by Keith David, is killed. I just did not like either of them in the film or their performances. You have Daniel Kaluuya, and I get like they're very much opposite from each other. Where Daniel Kaluuya, you know, he's this very sensitive person, but there's just so much of his performance. I'm like, I can't understand what the fuck you're saying. You are so nonchalant, and you are so like non-reactionary to things that would generate like an oh my God reaction. Like, the way people react to things in this movie is weird. Like, the only one who feels like a real person is Brandon Pereira, because to me, this is a movie that's very inspired by Spielberg. Close Encounters of the Third Kind, Jaws, a little bit of Tremors in there too, which not a Spielberg movie, I'm just saying, that's definitely inspired by that. He's the only one that captured the awe, the terror of a prototypical Spielbergian protagonist, right? But I don't know, Daniel Kaluuya's non-reactions to things were bizarre to me, and just his mumble mouth performance was really frustrating. And then you have Keke Palmer, who is at a fucking 11 in every season. But, hey man, like, she is like a female Chris Tucker, and it's like, Jesus Christ. It's like nails on a chalkboard with her. Hey, man, N-word. I'm like, oh, God, I'm getting overwhelmed here. And you have these two extremes, and like it never synced up with me, their performances. And then you have Michael Wincott, who's, you've seen him in a number of films, Chad, The Doors, and he's played Dollar Bill in The Crow and things. He's been obviously in a number of other things. And he's good in the movie, but the writing for him is just so bizarre. Like there's a point in this film, he's like, well, I'm gonna leave the movie. And the way in which he does so makes no fucking sense. Like, why did you want to do that? I mean, you could say like, well, I guess they were kind of leading to that. Okay, so I'm going to spoil a point in the film that, listen, if you haven't seen it yet, you should have seen it now, all right? Okay? Spoilers, I mean, if I'm talking about these movies, end of the year, spoilers are a go. So Michael Wincott plays the cinematographer in the film. He's introduced in the beginning, and he doesn't get brought back until like really the last third of the film. And he's good. But throughout the movie, he's like creating a nature documentary, and he's watching these animals eat each other. And I'm like, that's kind of weird. But, it's like, it's very, visceral and savage and raw and stuff. And, because in the end of the movie, the creature, which is actually, it's not a UFO. It's actually it's like a giant space stingray. That's why, at least initially. And it has like an electromagnetic pulse where it shuts down like all electronics and shit. Electricity and everything. And so Michael Wincott, he has to use this like, manually powered camera to film the creatures, like on a crank, right? And he films it and they get it. And then at one point he's just like, well, I'm just going to get vored by the monster. I'm like, why? And he just steps out. He's like, come on, eat me. And it's like, okay. And it just eats him. And I guess the only thing I could think of, he had like a vor fetish, or he just really got off the idea of being eaten by something. I just don't know. I don't get it. And I guess, but they say it's like, well, he wanted to get the ultimate shot because like that's like always been his. They reference this one thing, the Oprah shot, which has another there's more context in the movie with the Oprah shot. But and the ultimate Oprah shot, I guess, is getting voided by a giant space stingray. And the thing can't digest like inanimate objects. It can't wouldn't digest the camera. But I feel like if it dropped from that height, it would fucking smash and be destroyed. I don't know. But anyway, he filmed it. He definitely did it. But I don't know. It didn't feel earned. It felt very weird. And there's like scenes with him where he's like, he has taking pills and he's like popping pills. I'm like, is he sick? And like, if they don't establish in the movie, like if they establish like, hey, he's like terminally ill and he's like, fuck it, I'm going to die anyway. Then I would have been like, okay, but they never state that. They never state that in the movie. And there's a whole other part of this film where it's like, I think Jordan Peele just had this idea of this chimp named Gordy, and it leads into Stephen Yeun's story. And even though like it's good, it's horrifying, no doubt, but it almost feels unnecessary. It feels like they still could have done the same thing that they did in the movie, but they could have taken more out of it. And like the Gordy stuff could have been its own separate film. Because Stephen Yeun's character, he's the mayor from Jaws. He's like, everything's fine, and I'm going to exploit this for my own monetary, well-being, and he ends up getting all these fucking people. He gets himself and his wife and his children and his employees and all of his customers voted up into a monster and slowly digested and shat out. I mean, that's what happens to him. But I think it's what happens. A lot of filmmakers, they get this clout, and they're able to do whatever they want, and they become indulgent, and to the point where it's like, it just doesn't feel necessary. And I feel like they could have taken a lot of this out. They could have worked on some of these characters, changed some of these characters. And then the ending doesn't make any, then it's confusing, where, usually there's like a lesson learned at the end of these films, right? And like there's a criticism, the whole movie's like a criticism on pursuing spectacle, or obsessed with the idea of spectacle. Yet all the characters want to still indulge in spectacle. And it's like, did Keke Palmer learn that lesson at the end of the movie? I don't think she did. And then there's this whole thing that's up for debate, which is very bizarre to me, where did Daniel Kaluuya die? And there's people saying, oh, no, he died. I'm like, what? And I didn't know that at first. Now people are saying, like, no, he survived. And it's like so weird that it's kind of left ambiguous. It's like, well, what? Yeah, what did happen? It didn't make any sense. That was very bizarre. I don't know. Again, it's like a lot of interesting ideas. Some of them well executed, some of them not. Some cool performances, some performances that just didn't work for me. It's definitely a movie that I was thinking about, so I'll give it that. But I was like, God damn it, if it was a little more time was spent on this script, and I think you could have had something like really, really special. But I know a lot of people love Nope. This is on a lot of people's best of list. So it's probably going to be one of my more controversial. This is probably my most controversial pick. I probably would say. You know, maybe number one might be controversial, but I feel very steadfast in that one. But yeah, Nope. This was a bit of a disappointment for me this year, Chad. And the thing is, I'm so interested in what Jordan Peele's going to do next. You know, it's not like I'm writing Jordan Peele off. I'm not going to go as far as to say, like, oh, he's like M. Night Shyamalan. He's still much better than someone like M. Night Shyamalan. Jordan Peele has not made The Last Airbender or the Old or the Glass of his career. Thank God. He has not gone that far yet, chat. So I'm still interested to see what he's going to do in the future, but I just wish he needs like a co-writer. I would like to see him direct someone else's script. I want to see him direct something where someone else wrote it. I think that would be really good. See, I didn't like the Akira scene. I was like, I was like, I know it's the Akira. I just didn't need that because it looked really bad. I think that whole shot with CJ just like, this looks awful. And that scene has been constantly paid homage to over and over and over again. I'm just like, I don't need this to stop doing it. It's like, and I expected better from him. I didn't feel like he would need to do something like that. That was weird. I really didn't like that. Anyway, but there was things I liked about Nope, but it was a movie I was very mixed on. I don't remember what I even gave this. I think I may give this like a low matinee or a high rental, and I stand by that. I was like, yeah, I had issues with this. I had a lot of issues with this movie. Good stuff, bad stuff. But I feel very steadfast in my number 4, Chad, the fourth most disappointing movie of 2022 for me, which was Steven Spielberg's The Fablemans. This movie is sprinkled with a couple of like really good moments. Obviously the scene of Judd Hirsch, who is, I think, barely 10 minutes of screen. I think he has like 8 or 9 minutes. But when he's on screen, he gets this moment with the Spielberg, the character who's obviously supposed to be Spielberg in this case is this character named Sammy Fableman. But he talks about what it's like pursuing a career in art. And it is both, it is endearing, but it's earnest and it's raw and it doesn't sugarcoat it. And I like that. It was like, this feels very real. It didn't feel schmaltzy like so much of the rest. This movie is saccharine. The trailers were right. This movie is very saccharine and sporadic in its thinking. And it doesn't really have like a thorough line. It's just kind of like as this was pointed out before by someone in the chat during my review. I was like, you nailed it. This is a checklist movie. It's like, this is what happened in my childhood, and then this happened in my childhood, and then this happened in my childhood, and then this, and schmaltz, and Michelle, I'm going, whoa, occasionally. But with Judd Hirsch in that scene there, he did a great job. And there's another scene in this movie with David Lynch's John Ford, which was an actual experience Steven Spielberg had, that is also really, really good. And I love that. That was also endearing and felt real and raw. But the rest of this movie, it's just kind of what Spielberg's been doing, I would say, for the last 15 or 20 or so years. He is just he's very wistful, and he doesn't feel very focused anymore when it comes to his filmmaking or his storytelling. It's just very workmanlike. And because of that, it just doesn't really feel special. It's like this movie, and I'm always very trepidatious about movies that are about filmmaking, because I feel like they are often indulgent and they are not honest. Now, there are exceptions, obviously, which I brought up a couple of exceptions recently that I think are quite good, like Boogie Nights and Adaptation. And hell, Tropic Thunder. But this one, it's like you're cutting a lot of corners. And you're being very sporadic in your storytelling and not giving anything like a particular amount of focus. And even though you have good performances from Judd Hirsch and David Lynch, and I forget the actor who plays Steven Spielberg in the movie, and you have some people are doing a good job of what they're given. It's not a lot, like Paul Dano and Seth Rogen, but then you just have these ridiculous performances and they're in a lot. Like Michelle Williams is a Looney Tunes character. She's a cartoon in this film. It's like, this person is not real. Because, the whole movie through dreams, it's like, yeah, that's what she is throughout this entire film. She is so broad in this movie. Anytime she comes on, I'm like, when I saw this, I was like, all right, here we go. I was bracing myself for the next Michelle Williams scene. And it's too bad because, and again, it's not her fault. It's how the character was written and how she was directed. And she's played a lot of great roles throughout her career, but the choices that were made for this character are ridiculous. It's one of the worst performances of the year that I've seen in a theatrically released movie. I was like, give me a break. And that's why it's so surprising that so many people they're saying that she's the heart and soul of this movie. And I'm like, and she gets top billing. And I'm like, I do not agree. I'm two opposite sides divided by a canyon. I'm just like, yep, and it's an abyss. There's nothing below us. I don't see the ground at all. It keeps going. I really didn't like that. Has a couple of good moments. But overall, this is just another case of, I think, Steven Spielberg indulging his worst aspects as a filmmaker. And I wish he'd stop. I don't think that's going to happen anytime soon. So number 4 is The Fablemans. Number 3, chap, is The Whale. Again, there's a couple of things about this movie I like. Some of the supporting performances I think are quite good. Hun Chow, who has had a great year. She's also in The Menu. She does a really good job in this film as Brendan Fraser's nurse. Brendan Fraser plays this man, Charlie, who is morbidly obese. I don't know if they ever say his weight. In all the marketing, they say he's 600 plus pounds. But in any case, who is trying to reconnect with his daughter. And he's very sad for obvious reasons. And, he's very depressed. But you have Hun Chow, who plays his nurse, who is has this weird relationship with him. She's kind of an enabler, also taking care of him at the same time. And you also have another performance in the film who she's not in it a lot, but Samantha Morton, who plays Charlie's ex-wife in the movie. She's quite good for the limited screen time that she gets. And Brendan Fraser is also quite good for the most part in the movie. The biggest problem that this movie has is one, again, it's so much of this film is played so broadly by its characters. And it's a mixture of this really sloppy direction from Darren Aronofsky, who's very hit and miss for me as a director. And the screenplay was by the same guy who wrote the script for the original stage play, which this is based on. I feel like those two things is what underserves this film so much and underserves some of these performances. Like Sadie Sink's character, who's a fine actress. She's great. I'm excited to see her in more things. She was in Stranger Things, of course. She plays Max, and she was also in Fear Street. And her character is just mad for the sake of being mad. And she's a psychopath. And there's just nothing else that defines her. It's just kind of weird performance. That's what she's being directed to do. And the other thing about it is that Darren Aronofsky directs Brendan Fraser at times in a very exploitive, gross way. There's a sequence in this film where Brendan Fraser becomes a cartoon character, where he literally gets up and attacks his kitchen and just starts stuffing his face with as much food as he can get his hands on. I'm like, this is not real. This is exploitive. I have never seen a case like this before. Like, I've grown up around people who are obese and who may have had an eating disorder, and it's never like this. And it's like, this is bullshit. It's offensive. And the screenwriter and Darren Aronofsky should be ashamed of themselves for doing something like that. It's just gross. It takes you out of the movie completely. And I was like, that's why, I don't know. Like, I think when Brendan Fraser's not doing that, he's quite good, and it's quite sad. And it's like, damn. And it's not his fault. It's the direction and the screenplay. But yeah, that is why The Whale, for me, is my third most disappointing movie of the year. At number 2, and this one I was like, God damn it, I was so looking forward to this film. But I was hopeful, but yeah, I have to admit, Pixar's Lightyear. Those trailers were so good. I was like, ooh, we're finally getting Pixar. Now, listen, I know Pixar did WALL-E, of course, but this feels like, it feels like Pixar's version of Aliens or Starship Troopers. Like, that's kind of cool. And it's with Lightyear, but it's not the action figure. It's the movie that inspired the action figure that Andy would watch as a kid, and wanted him to get a Buzz Lightyear. It's like, oh, I get it. Apparently, no one else got this. And I like the first third of this movie, which is kind of sad and tragic. But man, the next 2/3 of this film, when we introduced to all these other supporting characters, again, Keke Palmer. Maybe I just don't like Keke Palmer. I don't know. Maybe there's something about her. Keke Palmer and Taika Waititi. You know, listen, I think Taika Waititi is getting a lot of hate right now, and some of that I feel like is undeserved. In this movie, I'm just like, you just hired Taika Waititi to be Taika Waititi, and that was unnecessary. And it's just Buzz Lightyear babysitting these schmucks for an hour and 10 minutes, and then the first 20 minutes being the good part of the movie. But like the next 70 minutes of this film is just him babysitting these really annoying, incompetent characters that do not grow on you. And the only thing that is tolerable that you do find some enjoyment in occasionally is when this little robot cat who pops up, who's there, who's like, oh, thank God Socks is here, because otherwise this would be just a really miserable experience. It's the reason why I gave this film a rental. But yeah, I mean, it looks pretty. You know, it definitely does. I love the aesthetic. It's like Aliens. It's like Pixar's version of Aliens or Starship Troopers, you know? Those 80s, 90s sci-fi action films. I like it for that. And then the choices they make with Zurg, I feel like, I don't know, kind of a letdown, a big disappointment. That didn't work for me at all. Yeah, I was bored. That's the thing about the movie. It was just kind of boring. And I mean, I think Chris Evans does a good enough job, but outside of that, yeah, I was really hoping this was like one of my most anticipated movies of 2022. I love those teaser trailers and the songs and the way it was looking. I was like, oh fuck, here we go, nice. And yeah, it just let me down when it came to its storytelling. It was a major disappointment for me. But chat, it is not as disappointing as the most disappointing movie of 2022 for me, and that film is James Cameron's Avatar 2 Blue on Blue. Also known as Avatar: The Way of Water. Listen, as I said during my review, this movie is visually beautiful. Gorgeous looking. That water looks good. I'm never going to say that water looks bad. The water looks great. My problem, and I'll say it to the end of time, is that this movie is the exact same story as the first film, except it's filled with more annoying characters. That's the only big difference with this movie. It's the same story where you have Jake Sully. Well, I have to say, they call him Sully now. They don't say Jake Sully. They call him Sully. I'm like, all right, that's nice. And, you know, it's 10 years later, and Jake Sully and his family, which him and Nick Nack have been pooping out a lot of kids. They got a whole brood of them, Chad. There's a lot of them now. You know, they are being hunted by the humans. The humans come back. They want another MacGuffin. They're done with unobtainium. They want whale splooge. And they also, for whatever reason, want Jake Sully and family. And so they go hide out with the water Na'vi, or this Na'vi culture based around water. You know, same species, but they have, you know, like just different things about them, right? They're more adapt for the water, and they learn to be water people, much in the same way that Jake Sully learned to be a Na'vi in the first. It's the same movie. It's just now with more characters doing the same things. That's all it is. The first 10 minutes of this film retcons a whole bunch of shit from the first movie. Everything in regards to Stephen Lane's character of the evil colonel. He's back as a blue kitty cat in this movie. And I mean, I was like, how? And they just like, we just made it up. I would have appreciated if they just said, listen, we just made up some bullshit. And now he's back, and they have oh my God, that's like, oh yeah, I love it. I mean, I don't want to spoil. I mean, I don't know how many people have seen it, but it's the first 10 minutes of the movie, chat. Like, it's not a big spoiler. So Stephen Lane's blue kitty cat, he wakes up, he's like, I'm a blue kitty cat, why? And he watches this video of Stephen Lane before the final events of the first movie. He's like, yeah, so we're being told by Giovanni Ribisi, even though Stephen Lane, who beat the shit out of Giovanni Ribisi earlier in the film and was like, this is my operation now. Apparently he's listening to him here. He told me to do this video because in case I die, which ain't gonna happen, wink, they're gonna put my DNA, they're gonna mix my DNA with a Navi DNA and make you, other person. So in case I die, you can come back for revenge in 10 or so years. Anyway, bye-bye. And then that's it. I was like, what? And then there's another thing they retcon. There's a human character in this movie who is a part of, his name is Spider, who is, he's not a Navi, but he wants to be a Navi so fucking bad, and he wants to fuck this one Navi girl so fucking bad. It's like, everyone's like, this is obvious, come on. But I'm like, this character is the son of someone, and I'm like, why wasn't this stated in the first movie at all? It's like that this character has a son. It's like, that's pretty big. And that's not mentioned like once. Like, who's the mom? Nothing. And I'm like, all right. And so they do a lot of retcon. But the problem is that so much of this movie is just them doing the same things again, except it's in the water. And you're following these, and it's tropes. You're following these stereotypical characters. You have the brother, you have the older brother who is responsible and has to take care of everyone because everyone's not doing what they're told to do. You have the rebellious second older brother who is getting in trouble every time. Everything he does, he never listens anymore. And then you have the adopted sister who is blue kitty cat Jesus. They do have a messianic figure. They have an immaculate conception, which they do not go into details about. Every time they're like, hey, we're going to talk about this. No, we're not. And she's there, and she does Jesus cat things, and I'm like, why can she do these things? And it's like, don't worry about it. Watch the 9-hour movie we're going to release in 2024. I'm like, okay. And then we have the little kid, the Took, who everyone says is so cute, but her job is to get captured all the time. That's her job. She's like, I'm cute. Oh, I got handcuffed. And that other thing, the best supporting performer in this movie is Handcuffs, because there are so many times the kids get captured. I want to say 4 times in the movie. 4 fucking times. I will tolerate getting captured once. I will just like, hey, yeah, that's what happened. You get captured once. 2 times, I'm like, all right, you really push. You get captured 3, I'm like, all right, fuck that. But they get captured 4. And the thing is, James Cameron tries to get away with it by having one of the kids say, I can't believe I got captured again. It's like, no, I can't believe it either, but you don't say that. Yeah, and yeah, it's the same thing. I don't get it. It's beautiful, yes. But this movie makes the same mistakes as it. If there was another film, another genre movie that did the same things that Avatar did, that movie would be criticized forever. It would be lambasted with criticisms, but this movie is not. And I was just like, that's frustrating. And so I'm calling out. I'm calling what the mistakes that this movie makes, which are very obvious. And it bothers me. It bothers me, chap. But I know a lot of people like it. A lot of people love this movie. This is on a lot of people's best of lists. And again, hey, we all have different opinions, chat. Like what you like, dislike what you dislike. It's what I always say. I like when we disagree, because we can have passionate conversations. I think it's really fun. But yeah, chat. Avatar 2, Blue on Blue, also known as Avatar: The Way of Water, is my most disappointing movie of 2022. And those are my most disappointing movies of 2022. What do you think of my list? Let me know.